In the annals of history, few names evoke awe and mystery quite like Mansa Musa, the 14th century emperor of the Mali Empire. Known widely for his staggering wealth, Mansa Musa is often referred to as the richest person who ever lived. His riches were so immense and so lavishly displayed during his legendary pilgrimage to Mecca that they disrupted entire economies and left observers across the Islamic world and Europe speechless. Yet, behind the golden legend lies a far more profound story, one of power, intellect, vision, and cultural renaissance. The Mali Empire, located in present-day West Africa, was a thriving center of trade, education, and religion in the 14th century. Stretching from the Atlantic coast to the edge of the Sahara, it controlled vast reserves of gold, salt, and other lucrative resources. Into this dynamic and complex world stepped Mansa Musa, a ruler who would not only elevate Mali's global prestige, but also reshape its internal fabric. This documentary explores the untold story of Mansa Musa, not just as the richest man in history, but as a transformative leader. Through conquest, diplomacy, and devotion, Musa forged a golden age that would echo far beyond the African continent. Long before Mansa Musa's reign, West Africa was a mosaic of cultures, kingdoms, and trade routes woven through the desert sands and river valleys. It was a region rich in natural resources, where gold gleamed beneath the earth and caravans crisscrossed the Sahel, connecting Africa to the Mediterranean world and beyond. At the heart of this landscape lay the foundations of the Mali Empire, destined to become one of the most influential empires in African history. The story of Mali begins with the fall of the Ghana Empire in the 11th century, which left a power vacuum in the western Sudan region. Out of this turmoil emerged a warrior prince named Sundiata Keita, a legendary figure whose life was immortalized in the Epic of Sundiata. In the early 13th century, Sundiata led a coalition of Mandinka clans to victory at the Battle of Kirina, defeating the oppressive Sasso king, Sumanguru Kante. This victory marked the birth of the Mali Empire, a unification of diverse peoples under a centralized monarchy. Sundiata laid the groundwork for a stable and prosperous state. He established a capital at Niani, codified laws, organized agriculture, and began to tap into Mali's greatest economic advantage, its gold reserves. Mali controlled the lucrative trans-Saharan trade routes, connecting North Africa to sub-Saharan Africa. Caravans carried salt, copper, ivory, and especially gold across the desert, enriching the empire and its rulers. Towns like Timbuktu, Gao, and Djenné became bustling hubs of commerce and culture. By the early 14th century, Mali had become a regional superpower. It was during this era of prosperity that Musa Keita, later known as Mansa Musa, rose to prominence. According to historical accounts, Musa was appointed deputy ruler when Mansa Abu Bakr II set off on an ill-fated expedition to explore the Atlantic Ocean. When Abu Bakr failed to return, Musa assumed the throne in 1312 CE. Though much about his early life remains shrouded in mystery, it is believed that Musa came from a noble lineage tied to the Keita dynasty. His rise was marked by strategic wisdom and a deep devotion to Islam, which would profoundly shape his reign. With access to immense resources and an already flourishing trade network, Mansa Musa inherited more than a throne. He inherited the reins of one of the most powerful empires in the world. What he did with that power would make him a legend. One of the most defining events of Mansa Musa's reign, and indeed one of the most remarkable spectacles in medieval history, was his pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324. As a devout Muslim, Musa undertook the Hajj not only to fulfill one of the 5 pillars of Islam, but also to assert Mali's presence on the global stage. This journey became both a spiritual quest and a calculated display of imperial power, wealth, and religious piety. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage was unlike anything the Islamic world had ever witnessed. He did not travel humbly. Instead, he organized an extravagant caravan that reflected the might of his empire. Contemporary chroniclers like Al-Umari and Ibn Khaldun describe the procession in vivid detail. It included an estimated 60,000 attendants, among them soldiers, officials, servants, and slaves. Musa reportedly brought along 100 camels, each carrying up to 300 pounds of pure gold. The emperor himself was dressed in regal robes of gold and fine silk, riding on horseback and accompanied by royal musicians and heralds announcing his presence. As the caravan made its way across the Sahara and into Egypt, it passed through bustling trade hubs and arid stretches of desert, drawing awe-struck crowds wherever it went. When Mansa Musa arrived in Cairo, his presence caused a sensation. The Egyptian Mamluk Sultan, Al-Nasir Muhammad, initially struggled to arrange a proper audience, as Musa insisted on maintaining the protocol of not bowing to another sovereign. However, political delicacy and religious brotherhood eventually led to a respectful exchange between the two rulers. It was in Cairo that the most legendary tales of Musa's generosity emerged. He distributed vast amounts of gold to the poor, to officials, and to merchants. His charitable giving was so excessive that it triggered a massive influx of gold into the local economy. So much so that the value of gold in Cairo plummeted, causing inflation that lasted for over a decade. Historians later estimated that this temporary devaluation of gold spread across the Mediterranean and Middle Eastern markets, illustrating the unprecedented economic reach of Musa's actions. From Cairo, the caravan continued through the Arabian Peninsula to Mecca and Medina. There, Mansa Musa performed the sacred rituals of the Hajj with great reverence. He also took the opportunity to network with scholars, architects, and religious leaders, inviting many of them to return with him to Mali. Among them was the renowned Andalusian architect, Abu Ishaq es-Saheli, who would later design mosques and public buildings in Timbuktu and Gao. By the time Musa returned to West Africa in 1325, his fame had spread across continents. Cartographers in Europe began including Mali on their maps, most notably in the Catalan Atlas of 1375, where Musa is depicted sitting on a throne, holding a golden orb. His pilgrimage not only marked a high point of Islamic devotion, but also broadcast the wealth, power, and sophistication of Mali to the wider world. In one journey, Mansa Musa had achieved what many rulers never could. He secured his legacy as both a spiritual leader and a worldly monarch. The pilgrimage placed Mali firmly on the map, literally and metaphorically, and set the stage for the empire's cultural and intellectual golden age. While Mansa Musa's pilgrimage dazzled the world, the foundation of his staggering wealth was rooted in Mali's natural resources and its strategic role in global trade. At the heart of this prosperity was gold, vast quantities of it, drawn from some of the richest mines in the medieval world. Mali's territory included the famed gold-producing regions of Bambouk, Bouré, and Wangara. These areas were not only abundant in gold, but also highly organized in their extraction and distribution methods. The empire strictly controlled access to these mines, allowing only government-sanctioned miners and traders to handle the precious metal. Gold dust was widely used as currency, and large nuggets were reserved for the royal treasury. However, gold alone did not generate wealth. It was Mali's integration into the trans-Saharan trade network that turned gold into power. Caravans of camels regularly journeyed between Mali and North African cities like Fez, Tunis, and Cairo, carrying gold in exchange for salt, textiles, horses, and luxury goods. From there, these goods flowed into the broader Mediterranean and Middle Eastern markets. Mali's trade network extended to Europe through North African intermediaries and reached the Arabian Peninsula via Islamic trading routes. Crucial to this trade were the empire's urban centers, Timbuktu, Gao, and Jenne. These cities became commercial and cultural crossroads where African, Berber, Arab, and even European merchants convened. Mali's ports on the Niger River enabled regional trade, while desert routes linked the empire to long-distance caravans. Mansa Musa leveraged these economic assets through a well-structured taxation and tribute system. Each conquered province was required to send annual tributes to the imperial capital, often in the form of gold, livestock, and grain. Caravan trade was taxed, and foreign merchants paid duties upon entering Mali's cities. These revenues filled the royal treasury and financed grand architectural projects, military campaigns, and religious institutions. The wealth of Mali was not merely hoarded, it was systematically harnessed. Mansa Musa's administration was highly organized, with appointed governors, farbas, overseeing provinces, and a strong bureaucracy ensuring that trade, law, and agriculture functioned efficiently. While Mansa Musa's wealth drew the world's attention, it was his patronage of culture, education, and religion that solidified his lasting impact. His vision for the Mali Empire extended beyond material prosperity. He sought to create a flourishing intellectual and spiritual civilization rooted in Islamic principles and African traditions. Upon returning from his pilgrimage, Mansa Musa embarked on an ambitious program of urban development. He poured immense resources into transforming cities like Timbuktu, Gao, and Niani into vibrant centers of faith and learning. Using the talents of artisans and architects he had met during his journey, including the famed Andalusian architect Abu Ishaq es-Saheli, He commissioned the construction of mosques, madrasas, Islamic schools, and libraries. Among the most celebrated structures was the Jinguereber Mosque in Timbuktu, an architectural marvel built from mud brick and wood, which still stands as a testament to Mali's cultural renaissance. Timbuktu, in particular, emerged as a beacon of Islamic scholarship under Musa's reign. The city attracted theologians, jurists, scientists, poets, and translators from across the Islamic world. At the heart of this intellectual flowering was the University of Sankore, which evolved from a modest mosque into one of the preeminent centers of learning in medieval Africa. The university offered instruction in theology, astronomy, mathematics, grammar, and law, producing generations of scholars who would preserve and transmit knowledge across West Africa. Mansa Musa's patronage created a literate elite who wrote in both Arabic and local languages, preserving religious texts, legal documents, and historical chronicles. Manuscript production flourished in Timbuktu, and its libraries held thousands of works copied and studied by generations of scholars. These manuscripts, many of which survive today, represent a crucial piece of Africa's intellectual heritage. Importantly, Mansa Musa ensured that Islamic values and education coexisted with indigenous African customs. He promoted religious learning while respecting the region's oral traditions, fostering a uniquely West African Islamic culture that emphasized community, morality, and respect for authority. The cultural and educational legacy of Mansa Musa endured long after his death. His investments laid the foundation for a golden age of scholarship that lasted through the Songhai Empire and beyond. The reverberations of his vision can still be felt today in Mali's historic cities, in African Islamic traditions, and in the global appreciation for Timbuktu as a symbol of ancient wisdom and knowledge. Mansa Musa's reign was not defined solely by wealth or cultural achievements. He was also a skilled ruler who maintained and expanded the complex administrative apparatus of the Mali Empire. His ability to govern such a vast and diverse territory was key to the empire's stability and prosperity. At its height, the Mali Empire covered a vast swath of West Africa, from the Atlantic coast to the edge of the Sahara, incorporating a multitude of ethnic groups and cultures. To govern effectively, Musa inherited and enhanced a centralized administrative system initiated by his predecessor, Sundiata Keita. The empire was divided into provinces, each ruled by a Fari or governor, who was appointed by the emperor and held accountable to him. These governors oversaw local affairs, collected taxes, maintained order, and enforced the emperor's laws. Musa maintained a royal court filled with scribes, advisors, diplomats, and military leaders. Justice and law were central pillars of his rule, guided by a combination of Islamic Sharia and traditional Mande customs. Courts were established in key cities, and judges, qadis, often ruled on civil and religious matters, promoting fairness and ethical governance. Diplomatically, Mansa Musa engaged with both Islamic and African powers. His pilgrimage to Mecca was also a diplomatic mission, cementing Mali's ties with the broader Islamic world. He established relations with Egypt, the Hijaz, and even distant centers of learning in Andalusia. Musa's reputation as a just and powerful leader gave Mali international credibility and opened new diplomatic and commercial pathways. Despite his devotion to Islam, Musa was a pragmatic ruler. He understood the importance of maintaining harmony between Islamic practices and local African traditions. While he promoted the spread of Islam through education and architecture, he did not impose it by force. Many of his subjects continued to practice indigenous religions, and Musa respected their autonomy, allowing for a relatively pluralistic society. Through careful governance, strategic diplomacy, and inclusive policies, Mansa Musa managed to sustain one of the most powerful empires in African history. His political acumen ensured that the wealth and knowledge accumulated during his reign were preserved and administered effectively across generations. The influence of Mansa Musa extended far beyond the borders of the Mali Empire. His Hajj, his wealth, and his sophisticated rule left an indelible mark on the global consciousness of the 14th century. For many in the Islamic world and Europe, Musa became the face of a rich and powerful Africa. Perhaps the most iconic symbol of Mansa Musa's global impact is his depiction in the Catalan Atlas of 1375, one of medieval Europe's most famous world maps. There, he is shown seated on a golden throne in the heart of West Africa, holding a golden orb. The caption identifies him as the richest and most noble king in all the land. This image represented a shift in how Africa was perceived, not as a dark, unknown continent, but as a source of immense wealth, power, and culture. After his pilgrimage, stories of Musa's generosity and splendor circulated across Europe and the Middle East. Traders, diplomats, and scholars brought tales of a golden empire ruled by a wise Muslim king. These accounts intrigued European monarchs and contributed to growing interest in African trade routes and resources, eventually influencing future explorations. Within Africa, Mansa Musa's name became legendary. Griots, the traditional oral historians of West Africa, enshrined his deeds in songs and stories passed down through generations. He became a symbol of just leadership, divine favor, and cultural sophistication. His reign was remembered not only for its wealth, but also for the dignity and vision with which he ruled. In modern times, Mansa Musa is frequently cited as the richest person in recorded history, with estimates of his wealth reaching into the hundreds of billions of dollars in today's terms. However, his true legacy lies in the enduring institutions he built, the global connections he forged, and the cultural flowering he inspired. His story is a powerful reminder that Africa has long been a continent of kings, scholars, architects, and empires. Mansa Musa's legacy challenges outdated narratives and reaffirms West Africa's rightful place in world history as a center of innovation, governance, and human achievement. The death of Mansa Musa around 1337 marked the beginning of a gradual but steady decline in the power and stability of the Mali Empire. Although his reign had elevated Mali to unprecedented heights in wealth, culture, and prestige, the empire's foundation began to weaken in the absence of his visionary leadership. One of the first challenges Mali faced was the issue of succession. Musa was succeeded by his son, Mansa Musa, who lacked his father's political acumen and authority. The transition of power was not smooth, leading to rivalries and disputes within the royal court. These internal tensions eroded the unity that Mansa Musa had carefully cultivated. As the central authority weakened, internal strife and regional rebellions became more frequent. Vassal states and outlying provinces began asserting their independence, no longer content with paying tribute to a distant capital. This decentralization further undermined the cohesion of the empire, leaving it vulnerable to external threats. At the same time, external pressures mounted. Nomadic raiders from the north and rival kingdoms from the south and east began challenging Mali's borders. The once flourishing trans-Saharan trade also began to shift, as new maritime routes along the West African coast emerged in the 15th century. These sea routes increasingly bypassed the overland caravans that had made Mali prosperous, diverting trade and wealth away from the empire. By the end of the 15th century, the Mali Empire had lost control over many of its key cities, including Gao and Timbuktu, which were eventually absorbed into the rising Songhai Empire. The sun had set on the golden age Mansa Musa had built, but the memory of his reign would endure. Mansa Musa's life was nothing short of extraordinary. A man whose faith, intellect, and wealth shaped one of the greatest empires in African history. Yet for centuries, his story remained untold or marginalized in mainstream historical narratives, overshadowed by Eurocentric perspectives. Today, his legacy resonates more powerfully than ever. Mansa Musa was more than the richest man in history. He was a transformative leader who elevated his people and redefined what power and prosperity could look like in medieval Africa. His story is a testament to Africa's rich heritage and a reminder of the enduring impact one visionary ruler can have on the world.